Today is October 6, 2024, and tomorrow is October 7, 2024, a day that is known throughout the world. It's the day that Hamas invaded the southern border of Israel. It killed between 1,200 and 1,300 civilians in one day, which had never happened before at all. And it has led to an ongoing war, Israel against Gaza, and now has spread to Israel with Hezbollah. That had started right away, but this is now really expanded. And Israel's invading Lebanon, or has invaded. Also, Israel's a powerful country with one of the best militaries in the world and probably the best, most savvy intelligence system, what Mossad just did the other day. But it hasn't ever had a long, long war like this. It's a small country with limited resources. And every male over the age of 18 is drafted. And then they also do reserve service, all the way up until 20, let's say, like once a year for a month. But this is really stretching manpower, stretching resources. Israel's standard of living, I think, has gone way down. And in the north, on the border with Lebanon, at least 60,000 people have been forced out of their homes, including a kibbutz that I actually was on in 1969, right on the border. At that time in 69, you could walk across the border with Lebanon. So I've been to Israel 7 times, and I considered a number of times living there. So I have a real strong affinity to it. And I speak some Hebrew, not fluently. I got pretty good at one point. I knew a lot of people in Israel. I actually was working on a film at one point. But I left the last time in 94, long time ago. And I left partly because I could see the direction things were going in, a negative political direction. So the day of October 7th, I call up my brother who lives in Sweden. And both of us agreed on 2 fundamental things. One, that Netanyahu was going to fuck everything up and turn worldwide sympathy into worldwide condemnation and antipathy and anger. That's number one. And number 2, we knew there would be a worldwide explosion of anti-Semitism. So both of us said that for the rest of our lives, Israel, the rest of our lives, because I'm 73 and he's 76 now, and the rest of our lives, Israel will be under a microscope. Israel will be disliked, distrusted, investigated, boycotted, whatever, for the rest of our lives. And Jews in America and throughout the diaspora, throughout the Jews living all over the world, will be also under the microscope, also not trusted or attacked, or it'll affect us negatively. So for both of us immediately, and for many Jews, it was realized as an existential crisis, a crisis that you can't solve, a crisis that are really hard to solve, a crisis that affects your consciousness every single day. It has gone down a little bit because over time, unfortunately, you adapt, and therefore you don't have it as present in your mind. Some people, for example, think about the Israeli hostages, Jewish hostages from all over the world, some Americans, that are still being held, like a year later, in tunnels and so forth. And some have been released, some have gotten out, some have been rescued and so forth. But there's still, I think, something like 67. And in the past, Israel has done everything possible to rescue hostages. It's a national value system. And the feeling is, and it leads to real strong opposition against Netanyahu, which I totally agree with, is that it looks like he's been not focused on the hostages and cares more about continuing the war. So those of us who don't agree with that we demand a ceasefire, and there's, it's not a majority, but there's quite a few Jews and Israelis, and of course the rest of the world that wants that. And the U.S. has tried, but they haven't used enough pressure. And that is why I put this up. No more enabling, because when you say we've got to have a ceasefire and they have to make peace, and then you approve $10 billion more in weapons, that's enabling. That is not putting your money where your mouth is. And I have called Netanyahu, labeled him Trump 2.0. So the existential crisis is not just focused on Israel, but for me, totally focused here as well. And on a daily basis, I have to decide which issue I'm going to put my attention on. And I've tried to do both. Right now, it's been more on Trump. But today, in the next few days, it's going to be about Israel on October 7th. And I'm going to be attending some events that are from groups here connected to groups in Israel that are fighting for equality, that the leadership is both Jews and Arabs, that all information produced is in Hebrew and Arabic and English, and that are really going the extra distance to try to create some measure of equality. It's a long time off, but some of us are supporting those movements in Israel. Shortly after October 7th, I wrote a flyer called "We're Living in Fateful Times," in the existential wilderness. And it says, perhaps like you are experiencing existential dread or flashbacks of intergenerational trauma. In your darkest hours, you may feel this as a foreshadowing. So where would intergenerational trauma come from? Well, for Jews, of course, the Holocaust and many generations of oppression and killing and so forth. And we thought we had gotten past that. And I had felt that Jews in America were now really mainstream and we were accepted and appreciated and not hated by and large. And this has opened up the doors to that kind of shit. And when it becomes acceptable for a candidate for president and other people like that saying outrageous stuff, a guy who's running for governor of North Carolina who denies the Holocaust. So it's opened the doors. It's opened the doors to some really dangerous things. Now let me show you a few other things. So one of the movements that's doing something amazing is called the Parents Circle. And I've been supporting them for quite a while. And what they are is a movement of Palestinians and Israelis, parents who have lost a child from the other side. So Palestinian whose son was killed by the Israel Defense Forces for no reason, or an Israeli girl that was killed when the Intifada was blowing up buses and other things in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, killed. And those two started this movement. One is Israeli Jew, one is Palestinian Arab, and they've remained connected. They've remained comrades for all of these years. I think it's about 18 years, I'm not sure. And the movement has spread, and now there's, I think, 700 people doing that. And it's limited in terms of the people in that part of the inner circle are limited to people who have lost a child in the conflict from the other side. But then there's all these support movements for it, and I'm part of that. The other thing I want to show you is a map. I'm not going to open it up, but this shows where things could go. It's a map, big map of Israel on one side, and a map of Palestine on the other, which leads to the idea that we have to share the land. It's one land, two peoples, two religions, two languages, two customs, but one land that can be shared, in my opinion. Small opinion, not in the mainstream, but maybe. So in relation to that, we have seen this flag all over the place, and sometimes it's being presented. Okay, I'm having trouble. Sometimes it's being presented in an aggressive way, I believe. Sometimes it's gotten out of hand, and I believe that every movement, that every nationalism becomes fanatic. Palestinian nationalism, Israeli nationalism, you can call it Zionism, whatever you call it. Even the African National Congress that everybody worshiped, they became fanatic. Every nationalism, Irish nationalism, American nationalism, become fanatic. So what do I believe in place of nationalism? It's called patriotism. So we see, and we did a session on this, we did a podcast about this, the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Let's say nationalism is you're proud of your own country and you disdain and hate other countries, other peoples. Patriotism is you're proud of your own country, but you don't hate other countries. You're proud of what you are, but you don't have to hate others. There's a great song by Jackson Browne, fairly recent, called I Am a Patriot. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, powerful song.
I am a patriot, and I love my country, because my country is all I know. I want to be with my family.
Okay, and the other flag, of course, is the Israeli flag with the Star of David. It's a blue and white flag. And actually, of course, this has historic connotations because Star of David, of course, goes way back. The blue and white is also used on a prayer shawl that Jews wear in synagogue, combination of blue and white. And so this has been the flag ever since, well, before the state was declared. And this flag is being condemned by the same people holding the Palestinian flag. And basically, I think some flags have been burned and so forth. But there are Jews who are not afraid to march with it. But what has not happened is what I've been wanting from day one is both flags together to show that there's one land, two peoples, and so forth. And nobody's done it. And I had wanted to do it at a demonstration of one, being taped, videotaped, and it might go viral. But I wasn't doing it. I wasn't wanting to do it as, trying to anger people, I wanted to do it as a statement. It hasn't happened. May it happen someday. And meanwhile, this week, I want you to not forget what has happened. I want you to not pretend this is just as usual. People who say, well, they've been hating each other for 70 years. They've been hating each other for all these hundreds of years. It's not true. There have been times when there was peace or reconciliation, or at least an adaptation, adapting. And that could happen at some point. So to throw up your hands and say, well, that's the way it is, that's the way it always is, that's the way it's going to be. No, that's wrong. And this week is a week in which we have to focus on this and try whatever we can to push for ceasefire now, and stop the enabling. And I'm Johnny Golden. I'm a Jewish American, and I'm really caring about this issue.